first experience.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Should I just do the trigger warning again? Just
just in case. Yeah, sorry.
So just to say, quick trigger warning that I am going to talk about suicide very briefly. So yes, I'm a mental health nurse by trade, and as a student nurse, I thought that my colleagues would be the ones that were seeing lots of death. And what I realised was, when I first experienced the loss of one of our patients, which really hit me hard, because I thought that I would be, lifting people up because they were depressed, and I would be sort of getting rid of the demons for people. And of course, that is very much what we did. But also this realization that sometimes you see somebody who's just got a normal life who hits depression and anxiety, and it becomes so much that it's really, really difficult to deal with. And I remember I was 19, and there was a woman on the ward who was so successful, this successful businesswoman. She had the car, she had the clothes, she had everything. For a 19-year-old Laura, looking at her thinking, wow, you've got it all. And then for her to take her life, I never could understand it. And it was something that I kept coming back to throughout my life. And then you fast forward to 2018, when I experienced my own mental breakdown. And that was me. I was that successful businesswoman. I had, 25 members of staff. I'd built my business to a point where it was successful. For those looking on, there was me, the successful one, that I'd achieved. And yet there I was experiencing the deepest and darkest of depressions. And the reason why was because I was burnt out, because I was pushing and pushing and pushing, because I thought that that's what it was to have a business. I thought that this was normal. If you were operating a business, then it would be hard. And I'm not wrong, right? It is hard. It is hard. And I just didn't see that there was a breaking point. And then I pivoted my life to change what I did so that I could support other business people to understand when it is that we need to stop and when it is that we need to really look after ourselves, because it's so, so important. So that's kind of where I am now. And I work as a burnout coach. My name's Laura Jessica Walker, and that's the name of my business. So I'm a burnout coach, obviously a mental health nurse by trade. And I use all of that combined with my experience of my recovery, of realizing what I had to input into my life to change the way that I lived so that I could deal with stress and be really happy. I know it sounds like this is really doom and gloom, but it really isn't. And when we get this right, we can be busy and we can run our businesses and be happy at the same time. So that's me. So I was a co-founder and an executive at the time. Now I'm a burnout coach. I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm a taxi driver to teenagers. I've got all the jobs, as I'm sure that you have too. And the one thing that I want to say is that if we don't take time for our wellness, then our bodies will make us make time for our illness. And that is the thing that I learned. So I'm just going to share my screen with you now. Hopefully this is going to work. This is the techie bit now, look. Do that. Is that it? Can you see? No, you can't, can you?
Not yet.
You might have to pretend you're seeing it. How's that?
Something's happening. Yeah, we've got
it. Is this good?
Yes.
Brilliant. Okay. So, whoa. So I'm just gonna talk to you a little bit about the culture of normalizing stress. Now, unfortunately, that is the world that we're living in right now, is we are normalizing something that really is not normal. So this idea that we must be busy, that stress is a motivator. And that's where I was. I used to have conversations with people, and you may have this too, where people say, how are you doing? Are you busy? That's like the first thing that we ask. You busy? Like, busy's good, yeah. But and of course it's good. It's good to have money coming in and for our businesses to have lots going on. But constant busyness is not good for us. And it's interesting. There's a Buddhist teacher called Tara Brach, and she says, this is her quote, that busyness is the most common socially sanctioned way we use to avoid pain. And it's so true. We keep ourselves busy so that we don't have to think about the things that we don't want to think about. And we get busier and we get busier. And actually, we're not really managing ourselves particularly well if we're doing that. And that was me, by the way. And this idea that we can push through, that stress really isn't a real condition. It's not like, a broken leg or having something wrong with the tangible that's wrong with our bodies. It's really intangible, isn't it? It's really difficult to show somebody that you're stressed.
Yeah,
and there's
definitely.
also sorry, go on.
I was going to say definitely, because
Yeah.
also as a father and husband, you don't want to be showing it. You don't want to show vulnerability.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I see that a lot more in the clients of mine that are men. Yeah, absolutely. And this badge of honor, where you're making the most of the opportunities that come into you, you're saying yes to everything, because there's some sort of showiness in being able to manage that. And the fact is that we just can't do it all, and that's okay. So I don't know if you've got a pen or a phone or something that you can use to just kind of make a note of this, or whether you just want to tot it up in your head, but it may help to rate your stress. So you can do that by just going through all of these A to G, and you'll see, I'll give you an example as A. If you're irritable, impatient, and wound up, sometimes you would score 1, frequently you'd score 2, and all the time you'd score 3. So it might be good to just do this for a moment. I'm going to give you a bit of a moment to do this. It's quite interesting. Before I came on here, my husband said to me, "Have you rated your stress recently, Laura?"
Yeah, you can't go telling us. And
exactly, right, because we're not immune.
What's the levels again? So 1 is like now and again, or
yeah, so never 0. 1 is sometimes.
Yeah.
2 is frequently.
Yeah.
And 3 is all the time.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So on the next slide, it will give you. Has everybody managed to do that? Yeah. Just checking everyone's okay.
I don't mind being a guinea pig if you.
All right, if you're happy. So here we are. Here's the score. So 1 to 8 is mild, 9 to 16 is moderate, and 17 to 21 severe. So if you wanted to share your scores, you can, but I'm not going to make you.
Yeah. So I had mine as a 9.
Okay. So you're just on the cusp there, aren't you, of moderate? So what I tend to say is, mild, we can kind of expect to go, to have mild stress every now and again. Okay, so if we're taking a snapshot in time right now, aren't we? So you might have had particularly a stressful day. So it's important to do this, from time to time as well.
Yeah.
Once we're getting into moderate, then that's where I say, okay, we might need to start thinking about putting some things in place, or having some things that you need to do. And I'm going to come on to that in a minute. Some non-negotiables that you can do every day to kind of bring your stress down. And then if we're scoring above 17, then we're looking at severe, and that's when we really do need to we need to do something now. Basically, it's really important that we do something to nip it in the bud, because as you know from my story, it doesn't bode well if we just keep going and ignoring it. And the thing is that we're really good at doing it. When we're high stress response constantly, we can keep going and keep going and keep going, because we're working on adrenaline. But it's not doing good to our bodies. And I'm hoping this will be, no, it isn't the next slide, but I'll tell you what's going on in our bodies now. So the circle on the left is showing you how things used to be when we were cavemen. Okay, so we would have a stressor. Here I've got a lion. So let's just say a lion's coming to get us, or we see a lion, and our brain activates the stress response. And this is fight or flight that you will have heard of. And this is the idea that we either run away from the lion or we fight the lion. And our body is ready, it's primed, we've got everything going on. So we've got increased blood pressure, adrenaline's gone up, the cortisol's gone up, and we're ready to take on this lion. And we do one of two things: we fight it or we run away. And then this is a really important bit. So there's been a lot of work around completing our stress cycles, which is what this is, a stress cycle. Something else needs to happen to get rid of all of that adrenaline. So yes, by running and fighting, that might happen, but we tend to have a lot of it left over as well. So what would have happened is the caveman would have gone back to his village and celebrated either the kill, or the fact that he was alive. And they would have done some dancing and really got rid of all of that stress out of their body. So they've completed that stress cycle, ready for the next time that the brain's activated. And then on the right hand side, you'll see what's happening in our lives at the moment. Because of the way that our society is, we just don't get rid of the stress. So we have a stressor. So I've got an example here of breaking news that's stressful. Our brain activates the stress response just like it does with a caveman. But at this point, no action's taken. We might just carry on scrolling on our phone. But we've got this activated stress response and we're not doing anything with that energy. And so we get this chronic activation. So basically the stress builds and builds, and then we get stressed again with the next thing. Now, this obviously doesn't need to be breaking news. This can be all sorts of things. This can be, your tax bill. This can be, having too much work to manage.
I was just relating it to awful clients, perhaps,
Right. Well, yeah, absolutely.
If you get a run of them, yeah, sadly you can't kill them, so you have to.
Or run away with them, from them, presumably, either.
Get your money and then run away.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically what's happening is we're not completing that stress response. So we need to think about ways that we can do that, which, it's the old thing that we're told all the time. Exercise is absolutely amazing for doing that. So making sure we've got time to be able to get rid of that excess stress, otherwise we're just carrying it around. And what happens is it has an effect on our health if we don't. So there's just a list of things here that can be a big problem if we're carrying stress around in our bodies. Chronic stress. So depression and anxiety, that's the one that got me. I didn't see it coming. But, all of these things, pain, sleep problems. The thing about sleep that I hear often is people waking at sort of 2 a.m, 4 a.m, and then not being able to get back to sleep again. That's common in stress. Another one is not being able to get to sleep at all. And then, all the other things on here. Thinking and memory problems, that's definitely one that I am experiencing. So just trying to keep things in your head.
Just quickly, Laura, just looking at stuff coming in on the group, and one question about stress is customers not paying on time. I'm sure your husband's had that on a number of occasions. Obviously it's a difficult one to break that kind of cycle, isn't it, if you've got that stress of a non-payer?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And it's sort of difficult to talk about without sort of knowing the situation. But it's just it is about holding your boundaries, isn't it? And being, you're saying that you're expecting to be paid and chasing on a daily basis. But that's easy to say, isn't it, when you're dealing with everything else as well.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt.
No problem at all. I'm quite happy for you to throw in questions as they come up.
Yeah, no, it's just a funny one. A few people have done some scores. There was 14 and 17. Mark's got a 94, but that's probably from working with his brother. But yeah, people saying about a bit of memory loss. So yeah, a lot of this stuff sort of ringing true. I know sleep problems, that's quite often talked about in the group as well. Because of worry and stuff, you can't sort of wind down. Right. So yeah, certainly I see a lot of these kind of comments, from group members.
Okay. Yeah, and the other thing is with depression and anxiety, it can be low level as well. I had it catastrophically at the end, but you can have that sort of low level depression, that sort of loss of any you know, just not wanting to do anything, wanting to go to bed and cover up in the duvet, but knowing that you've got to go to work, and people just doing that, turning up for work, doing the stuff, but they're not really there. It's just like they're going through the motions. So it's just being really aware of how you're feeling, really.
Yeah.
So this one is like, do you know what your stressors are? So there's external stressors and internal stressors. So let's look at the right hand side to start with rather than the left hand side. So the right hand side, you've got all these like little things that stress you out. So little things like empty juice carton in the fridge might be one, or, you know, one that I had as children, not being able to find their shoes at 10 to 9 when you're trying to get them out for the school run, that sort of thing. You know, things that seem really little, but they can be really big when they're on top of everything else. And then there are things in there, as you'll see, that are totally out of your control, like the global pandemic. That was totally out of our control. There was nothing that we could do about that, and yet it was incredibly stressful. Climate crisis, you know, there's only so much that individuals can do, but it's massive. You know, there are things that are looming over us, aren't there, that are big and stressful that we can do nothing about. And then there are the smaller things that we really can do something about. Like, for example, if you're always losing your keys, you could try putting your keys in the same place every time, so that you don't have that stress when you're just going out the door of, crap, where are my keys? So those are the external stresses. And then the internal stresses, this tends to be where I work a lot as a burnout coach, because sometimes we cause ourselves lots of stress just because of the way that we feel and that we are, and the things that we believe. So just looking at the thoughts that we have, and the thoughts that we have will create our reality. So if we are thinking in a certain way, then that is so. So if we're thinking about the fact that, oh my God, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to pay my bills at the end of the month, or be able to pay my staff, or whatever it is, then that is, we're consumed by those thoughts, and then that just becomes what we're thinking about, which is stressful in itself. But those thoughts are also driven by fears. And so just as an example here, you know, thinking that I have to push harder, I have to do better, I have to keep up, I have to earn more, you know, I have to provide for my family, I have to do all this, is all those I have to's and I shoulds that are then led by fears. And those fears, we don't see these necessarily, but this is the work that I do, is kind of tapping into what is it that's driving those behaviors. Because sometimes if we can, well, all the time, if we can find out what those are and remove them, then a lot of that stress goes. So there's, what I'm trying to say is, we've got external stresses, and then we've got stuff that we carry around and probably have carried around since childhood, that actually makes our life even harder, because we're trying to do all these things because they're so important. But actually, when we look at it, some of those things we can let go, and we can give ourselves a break and be a bit more self-compassionate and kind to ourselves. And one of the things that I find time and time again is, when I trace that back, is that almost every human that you meet believes that they're not good enough, and that they will do everything that they can to feel that they are. Because when we're children, the feeling was that if we weren't good enough, then we would not be included in the pack. If we weren't in the pack, we wouldn't get fed and we'd die ultimately. So it really does go back to those fears. And those are the things that I find when I work with people who are in burnout. Those are the sort of layers that I peel off, and we find out what's really driving it. And what's really exciting is that when we can remove those, people feel so much lighter and able to, you know, not care so much about the stuff that feels so big a lot of the time. And I think, Gary, you said when I first came on, you said, you know, as you've got older, you just don't care as much anymore about that stuff.
No, I don't. And it's interesting, like I always see comments of people worried that they, you know, can't do a good wallpapering job or something like that, when they've done it thousands of times and they know they're really good at it. So that just proves your point. It's not actually about your competence in what you do. It's a belief about yourself, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is big stuff, because this is the stuff that drives us to stress. So I guess the message here is, be kind to yourself. So with the external stresses, there's a few things that I can recommend. So one of the things is that I always say not to have a list, but to put it in the calendar. It's just, this works for me and it's worked for some of my clients. It may not work for you, but lots of people find that they end up with all these lists, and those lists cause a lot of stress. Whereas if we can put, instead of having it on a list, if we can actually put it in a calendar and calendarize time where we will do that thing, it's out of our head. We don't need to worry about it anymore because it's in the calendar. You found the time where you're going to do it, and you don't need, it doesn't need to keep coming into your head of, oh, I must ring that person who's asked me to do a quote, or I must, do that, because you've got it in the calendar. You don't have to worry about it. So there's something about taking control of those thoughts that you have that come into your head that need an action, that make us feel stressed because we're like, oh, I must remember to do it. You don't have to remember, just put it on the calendar and then that will remind you. The next one is the Pomodoro habit. It's one that I love, particularly if you're doing admin. I've got mine's an Apple, but basically it is a timer. You put it on for 25 minutes and you decide you will not be disturbed from what you're doing. So if the phone rings, you're not going to answer it. You are just going to do that thing for 25 minutes. And I find, and my clients find, that they get so much done in that 25 minutes because they're not going to be distracted by anything else. So it's a great little tip for those external stressors. And then I come to my non-negotiables. Non-negotiables are things that you will do every day that are good for you. Okay. And they're non-negotiable, right? So they have to happen. And they can be really simple. So one of mine is to drink 5 pints of water a day. Because we know that if we're hydrated, our brains are hydrated, we can think better. It's so much better for our mental and physical health. And it's actually really easy. I just take a big bottle of water with me every day and make sure that it's drunk. So that's one non-negotiable I have. Yours will be different. Another one is to get outside in nature, because we know that that's really good for us as well. So one of mine is to make sure that I do that. And it's part of my recovery. I learned to meditate. So I take 20 minutes a day to just go inside, meditate. And that might be doing a guided meditation, or it might be just doing a silent meditation. But it's incredible. And I highly recommend it.
What's those couple of apps, Laura, which are good for meditation? So there's Headspace, isn't it? One Headspace. What's the other one?
Insight Timer is another really good one. Yeah.
So just on perhaps your lunch break, or if you're not on site, but if you always go off to your van, or do you know what, it's something I need to get back into. I done it a good while ago and I found it brilliant. But yeah, if it was in my diary or my calendar, I'd do it.
There you go. And it's such a simple thing. And the other thing is doing it regularly makes a real difference. So the first time you do it, you'll be like, oh, I'm not sure if that worked. It's about doing it regularly. And if you can't do 20 minutes, do 5. It's much more important that you do it regularly than you do a long amount of time. So if you're thinking, oh, I haven't got 20 minutes, just do 5 minutes. 5 minutes is good. Tick the box. That's your non-negotiable done. But if you can get yourself into the habit of just spending time taking yourself away from thinking, or away from thoughts, or just being able to watch your thoughts. I mean, in meditation, you're not going to take yourself away from thinking. I think that's one of the things that we think we're doing it wrong because we're thinking. It's totally fine. It's just noticing that you're thinking. And it's that gap between it's that gap between thinking and your mind, if you like, that you're trying to extend. So really, really good for you. And I do highly recommend it.
I'm just thinking in terms of calendar stuff as well for us lot. So like quoting and invoicing, if you go and look at a job like I do now, I just say, right, I'm doing my quotes on Wednesday, you'll get it Wednesday evening, rather than let it build up and oh, I haven't done that one from 2 weeks ago. I just have a set day for it, where I just do them in one evening. But most people, as long as you let them know when they're going to get it, they don't mind if it's a few days. So yeah, just one thing I need to put in the calendar is doing tax returns. So if I kept on top of that on a monthly basis, I wouldn't be spending a day doing it, which I will be doing soon. So it's just little habits to stop overwhelm, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And I think you're right with the sort of the accounting side of it. That's a really good one for the Pomodoro habit. So just saying, right, I'm going to do 2 Pomodoros, 25 minutes. That's all I'm going to do. And you'll be amazed how much you get done in that 25 minutes because you're so focused, rather than, like you said, trying to do it whilst doing other things as well. And I really like that idea of having a day to do those things and telling people, because you're then taking control, aren't you? You're holding your boundaries and saying, this is the day that I do that, rather than the customer having control.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. And then, so the internal stressors, so we've already talked about meditation, which is great. And anything that gets you into flow as well. When we talk about meditations, for some people that might be running, so like doing something like running that's repetitive, or cycling, or whatever it is that you do at the gym, might be rowing, but something that's repetitive. And people tell me that they get into this meditative flow. The same with doing something really creative. So if you're into, I don't know, drawing or whatever it is, but what it's like to get into flow. And I'm sure that you get into flow during your work as well. If you're painting, you probably get into flow. So that flow state is really important. So making sure that you get into it at least every day is really important. So I'm going to hop up to where it says best friend approach. So what I mean by that is that as humans, we naturally have something called a tend and befriend. I'm not sure that it's called a reflex, but we have something called tend and befriend. And that's because we're mammals. And if we didn't have that, then our young would not survive, because our young are pretty useless when they're born, aren't they? Because they're not able to walk or anything. So to survive, we have to have this tend and befriend. So we can use that on ourselves. We can actually turn that inwards by, and I call it the best friend approach, but really thinking about how you would talk to a best friend. So if they were you and completely overwhelmed and really stressed, what is it that you'd say to them? What advice would you give to them? And then turn that advice on yourself. We can often be really hard on ourselves. You've probably experienced this, where it's like, I just need to get on with it, don't I? When actually with a best friend, you might say, hey, are you okay? It feels like you might need some time off, or, you need to take a walk. So really listen to that internal voice, because I think sometimes that internal dialogue can be, it can be quite nasty. So, and you'll see underneath best friend approach, I've got internal dialogue stopper. And so I've got this nifty technique with that voice, and I'm sure you know the voice. It's the voice that, when you drop something, just think about what you say to yourself when you drop something. So that's the voice. That's the one. Okay, it's not necessarily kind, is it?
No.
No. And that internal dialogue is going all the time, telling, for God's sake, why did you do it like that? Or, I'm sure it uses much fruitier language than that as well. So with the internal dialogue stopper, this is an NLP technique, it's a neuro-linguistic programming. But basically, the idea is that you kind of work out where the voice is coming from. Now, this may sound really sort of out there, but it's really worth doing, thinking about, okay, where is that voice? So if we tune into it, we haven't got time to do it now, but I'm just going to take you through. So you tune into where it is, and it might be here, it might be there, it might be behind you, it might be above you. And then you imagine it, and you make it a color, and you make it a shape. And then you allow it to sort of move down your body, and you literally visualize it moving down your arm into your hand, and then you drop it onto your lap, and you let it roll down your leg and onto your foot, and you can either stamp on it and you can kick it away. I know this sounds bizarre, and I am going through it in a really quick manner, so you're probably thinking, what on earth is she talking about? But if you were to do that slowly, it's really, really effective in moving that voice, noticing it and moving it out of the way so that you don't have to listen to it anymore. But I guess the one thing that I'd say to take away is tune in and notice how you're talking to yourself. That's the first thing. Tune in and notice how you're talking to yourself, and then deal with it accordingly. And the way to deal with the internal dialogue is never to be nasty back to it, because then you end up with this little argument going on in your head. So it's with kindness and control that we knock it away. But that internal dialogue can be quite a nasty thing, and mine certainly was for a really long time, until I tamed it. I tamed the gremlin.
Yeah, no, I love NLP, so I know it works.
Yeah, it really does,
Yeah.
doesn't it? It's so simple, but it really, really does work.
Definitely.
Yeah, and then breathing. So I know it sounds really ridiculous, but breathing is so good for us in terms of, remember those 2 cycles that I told you about? So one where there was a completion of the cycle with the caveman, and the other one where that completion didn't happen. So one way that we can complete that cycle is to turn on the parasympathetic nervous system, which is basically going to do the opposite of the fight or flight. It's called the rest and digest. And to do that, we can literally do that with our breath. We have the power to do that. So one of the best way actually to come back to breath is to use something called box breathing, which is something that the Navy SEALs use before going into battle. And it really works. And basically, you're going to breathe in on the count of 4. You're going to hold for the count of 4. You breathe out for the count of 4. And then you hold out for the count of 4. And you just repeat that. So an easy way to remember it is just imagine, you can see me now making a box, and it's in, hold, out, hold, in, hold, out, hold. But obviously it's a lot slower than that. So do give that a go, because it works. Right, I'm on the final slide, Gary. You'll be pleased to know.
No, I'm really enjoying it. I appreciate it.
Oh, good. Good.
I'm
So
just checking messages on the stream.
So yeah, I just want you to make a promise that you'll do something differently from today around your stress and your overwhelm, because as I said at the beginning, it is big. It's not just a little bit of burnout, you know, it can make us really ill. So it is really important to stand up and listen to it and do something about it when you've got the chance to do something about it. Don't wait like I did, because the recovery period is a long, long time. And that's me. That's where you can find me if you want me.
Yeah, it's brilliant, Laura. Just something that's come to mind, and I see it a lot, is a lot of us struggle to say no, especially in the lead up to Christmas. You know, everybody wants immaculate house for the relatives, and you know, what's that all about, where we tend to say we're saying yes, and then we're fitting in weekends and building our stress levels up. What is that about, you know, not being able to say no?
It's going to be individual to the individual person of why they do it, but I think we're all guilty of being people pleasers. We want to be liked, and innately we want to be liked, and we want to be seen to be, you know, kind, and you know, and then saying no doesn't feel right. So, but it is about, I come back to again and again, these holding boundaries. What is okay and what is not okay, and making that decision for you around, because it's different. All of our boundaries are different. You know, it might be, I might really hate rock music as an example. I do quite like it, but imagine I didn't, right? So I would hold a boundary and say, oh no, I don't want that being played. That would be me holding a boundary, right? So we have to really get to know who we are, what's okay and what's not okay. And it's not always about what's okay just for us, but what's okay for our families as well. Maybe it's not okay to work weekends, or maybe you've made that decision, and then you just need to be really brave and hold that boundary and say no. Unfortunately, I will not be working weekends. And not to make excuses. I think that's the other thing. When we're saying no, we very often have to make excuses as to why. We really don't have to. It's okay to just say no.
Yeah. I was just looking at another message about struggling to, you know, when you're trying to sleep and you're worrying about the following day's work. Any techniques for, I guess a lot of that would be like internal dialogue, wouldn't it? What you're saying to yourself, why you're worried, breathing exercises to calm yourself down.
Yeah, so coming back to breath is always a really good one, because again, we're switching on that parasympathetic nervous system. You're not going to sleep if you're in fight or flight. It's not going to happen. So yeah, and you have the power and control to switch on that parasympathetic nervous system using breath and lots of other ways as well. So meditation, listening to something relaxing. The other thing is to get up. So if you're waking up in the middle of the night, to actually get up and come out of the bed for a minute, go and walk around and do something different, maybe read a book, do something away from bed, and then come back to bed again as if it's the first time that you've gone back to bed. So that was a top tip that I was given by a sleep expert, actually, because I asked that very question too.
Yeah, it's more often than not, you can just lie in bed, can't you, and hope it passes, but you end up being awake for hours.
Yeah. And then you start associating your bed as somewhere where you don't sleep. So it's much better to come out of it and then come back to it, so that bed is equal sleep.
Yeah, saying no as well to people. There's a lady which is quite popular on social media, a decorator, and she puts on all her socials that, right, I'm not taking any more bookings, I'm not doing any more quotes, I'll let you know when my diary is open. And she's stacked with work, so she's seen as a person as in authority, and people want it even more, don't they want that particular person even more.
Yeah, they really do. I think it's so important to hold boundaries, and I think that's the other thing with people paying as well. I think if you go in with that expectation that people that you will be paid on time, and that you don't do this and this, although it feels like you're not being kind and friendly, you really are. You can say that in a kind and friendly manner, but it's much better for your mental health, definitely.
Yeah, and even that goes as far as, I kind of say, I never let customers get any pains. I have full control over what I do. And, before, I turn up and they've got Wilco paint or whatever. And, obviously that can cause high stress. But I don't know whether the guys who have jumped into the Zoom, whether you've got any questions. Obviously appreciate you coming on. Have you got any question, guys?
Yeah, I have a question. You're speaking about the stress test and the different levels. You spoke about the moderate. What if it was high?
So if it's high, we need to be thinking about doing something quickly. So if it's high, we definitely need to be thinking about what those non-negotiables are that you're going to be doing. Also thinking about reducing work if you possibly can. It's really individualized, but yeah, if somebody's severe, then I would be saying, come and speak to me.
Okay, thank you.
Let's talk about some things that we can get in place quickly, because and the other thing to mention, I haven't mentioned that I do a much longer quiz, which I can give you the link to as well, so you can do a much sort of deeper look into sort of where you might be stressed as well. So I'll give you the link to that, Gary, if you want to.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'll share it with everybody.
Yeah, so it's called a burnout prevention quiz that I do. But the other thing also to say is that I do like a free 45-minute session, and I'm not all salesy. It is literally, I hold space for you. Then it can be really, really good for people just to come along and just really kind of unpick where we can change things. And there's a lot that I can do in that 45 minutes to help. So that's available as well.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to say as well about doing lists and stuff like that, and I appreciate it, and maybe not the best thing to do, but James Clear's book Automated Habits or something or other, I actually got a booklet with his book, and it's about just daily stuff which I do daily, and then you just do a little sort of tick next to it, and when you get to the end of the week, it's like such a kind of reward to show you're doing it. So even stupid stuff like diet, just having one fruit or whatever it may be, but I just list it all, just so your habit stacking. So I appreciate your list, what you say about lists, because I've got books, folders everywhere with tons of lists, which I don't know what half the lists are, but your non-negotiables are, if you list them and then you just tick it off every single day.
Yeah, it's really good, isn't it? My son's got one on his wall, and he even has get up as a kid, isn't it? Even when he's got up, he's like, oh, I can tick that one. But there's dopamine hit that we get from doing that tick. So yeah, it's really good to do.
Yeah. I'm just going to put it out to people listening if they've got any questions. Let me just double check, but I haven't missed any. Yeah, a lot of it about worrying about work next day. Running a business with ADHD.
This is my specialism.
So lots of work, but he's in utter chaos. So, this is going to come in handy, isn't it? What the tips you've given just in our short session here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also do a podcast with my son who has ADHD, which is called, I can't remember what the name of the podcast is.
That's not good, is it?
Hyper focus, positive minds.
Okay.
So yeah, lots of top tips in there as well.
Yeah, if you could, we get the links.
I'll give you some links, Gary, shall I?
What, can you do it now? Is that possible? Oh no, I'll tell you what, do it after.
Yeah, I can put it in the chat.
Yeah. Just double checking, haven't missed anything else. Yeah, I mean, somebody made a comment as well about, we can earn some decent money, but when we're so busy and overwhelmed and stressed, you don't take stock, do you, of what you're actually doing with it all? Or you just, with overwhelm, you're not really monitoring your progress or taking a step back. And
it's
that's
almost like
something
that hamster wheel, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's something I think we're probably all guilty of. Think, oh, we're doing all right, but we're not sort of putting it down as to where we need to allocate all our funds.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I believe I've covered everybody's questions. But no, I appreciate it, Laura. It's coming good timing, I believe. You've certainly given me some tips in the lead up to Christmas and whatever else.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, isn't it? We're at quite a stressful time of year as well. Yeah.
And like we said, when everybody that's kind enough to take some time and speak to people in my group, it's never a push for work, is it? It's just a helpful session, and we appreciate you coming on. And it's up to people if they want to work with you. But the fact that you offer a consultation for 45 minutes, I think that's amazing and much appreciated.
Yeah, and it is just that. It is just, I hold space. There's no sales on that at all. That is literally just come along and let's unpick it. And, I'm doing this because I feel really passionate about, I don't want people to burn out. I don't want people to get to where I did. So that's, that's part of why I do that. So don't feel like, oh, I can't take up a time, because really you can, because that's why I offer it. So it's okay.
Brilliant. Well, I shall let you go.
All right.
One more question, Laura.
Yeah.
The links you sent there to the quiz, there's a couple of people I've got in mind that are not to do with decorating, but family. Am I able to share it with those as well?
Of course you are. Yeah, absolutely.
I think they could definitely do it. They've got high stress London jobs, so they could definitely do with managing their stress levels, burnout.
Absolutely.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, nice to see you, Jürgen. Ditch, nice to see you, mate. Thanks for joining, buddy. And Laura, appreciate it.
Tuesday.
Okay.
See you Tuesday.
Yeah, definitely. See you Tuesday. Yeah.
You going up Monday night or Tuesday day?
So Tuesday and Wednesday.
Right. I'm going up the Monday night, so I've got a nice fresh start for Tuesday.
Yeah.
And then
so we're talking about a paint show, Laura. That's how sad we are.
A paint show.
We're going to get talk about paint and sundries, and we're probably going up just for a beer, in all honesty. But
sounds more like it.
I tried a new product yesterday.
Yeah.
Floater roll.
Oh yeah, it's good stuff, isn't it?
Amazing, game changer. I'll be telling you all about it in depth.
Over a beer, of course.
Yeah, I
Well,
hope
you've
so,
made
yeah.
me intrigued, and I don't even need it.
Your husband will know about it. But no, nice to see everybody, and have a good evening.
Cheers,
Take
guys.
care.
Thank you.
Take care. See you. Bye bye.